Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the next lesson. We're continuing to talk about boundaries today, as boundaries are so important when co-parenting successfully with a narcissistic parent. In this lesson, you'll see in the reading, there's actually a video link that I want you to watch of two parents who actually decided to separate and made a conscious effort to actually co-parent together. Now, they separated because of conflict. They separated because of dispute. They didn't love each other anymore. They didn't want to be together. And although these parents clearly aren't narcissists, they actually set aside their own trauma. And you'll hear that there's actually a lot of trauma that the two parents had experienced. They set aside their feelings towards each other, and they've actually been co-parenting successfully since that point. I think it's a really quite inspirational story. And one of the things that you really pick up on in the TED Talk is not their love or affection for each other, but instead their respect for each other and their love for their child. I think it's just a really good example of where, when we're determined to make something work, we can actually make it work. So have a look at it. Like I said, it's a little bit different, but there's a real story of determination and respect there, which I think that we can all learn from. I want to talk to you today about some ways that you can set boundaries with somebody who has a narcissist personality disorder or shows those narcissistic personality traits that we've been talking about. So we're going to look at some of the tips, some of the things that might actually help you navigate the conversation and process of setting boundaries with somebody in this position. We've talked about getting professional help. Now, professional help, and I know that, this might be a bit self-serving, but I promise you it is actually really worth considering, not only for yourself, but also as a co-parenting business. Any business at some times needs some coaching, and your business of parenting might need some family therapy at some stage to work more effectively together. These sessions actually work on those strong feelings and actually allow both parents to be confident and identify what it is that's important about that business of parenting, and for you both to learn and understand the strategies on how to manage the relationship and make sure that you're working together. So that's my first tip. I want you to remember, we've had a chat about this in the last unit, and decide what you are and what you aren't okay with. The first step, as we've seen, of setting a boundary is deciding what your limits are. It's important for you to have clear in your mind what it is that is acceptable and what isn't. This actually allows you to communicate these things clearly to the narcissistic co-parent, and that communication is key. The other thing that's really important is that if it doesn't feel healthy, then leave, walk away. Trusting your gut is really important when you're learning how to set boundaries with anybody, particularly with a co-parent who's a narcissist. The more you can learn to identify and trust when it's time to walk away, the better you'll be at handling the complexities of this relationship. The other thing that's really important to remember is that you don't have to justify or defend or explain why you have a specific boundary. Let me say that again, because that's really important. You don't have to justify, defend, or explain why you have a specific boundary, because your boundaries are your boundaries alone. You don't need to defend or explain why you're setting them to the narcissistic co-parent. It's your life and these are your decisions. If something doesn't feel good, you're not responsible for explaining anything beyond that. The other thing that we can do is practice how to avoid or redirect negative comments and questions. Practice makes perfect, or at least if it doesn't make perfect, it actually makes us more confident. Try role playing. So role playing with your therapist or somebody that you actually feel confident to do so with, and have a laugh about it. Role playing can be too serious. You've got to have a laugh. You can practice how to course correct or entirely avoid questions and comments that make you uncomfortable. Eventually, you'll actually be able to identify things as these things happen and as things are heading towards a confrontational place. This skill can help you actually navigate your relationship with the co-parent who has narcissistic traits and do so in real time. Narcissistic people love to talk about themselves. If you want to change the topic, try finding something they love to talk about. So practice in a safe way. The other thing to remember is the power of narcissistic personality disorder and the power of those narcissistic traits. One of the reasons why understanding these traits and boundaries can be so challenging is that people with narcissistic behavior tend to hold power over others. Keep in mind just how powerful that grip can be, especially if you've been in a relationship with a person for a long time. Their need to control you might have been normalized at this point to some extent. Often I talk to people who don't even realize and can't even recognize this control. Another thing that's important is you need to be firm and blunt. Be firm and blunt and be very clear about what it is that you expect and what you need. This is the strongest way that your boundaries can be taken seriously. And don't forget about the consequences. It's important to communicate the consequences that will happen if a person doesn't respect those boundaries. This should be something you've clearly identified in your mind before you have the conversation, where you tell them that things will be and need to be different. Having a clear consequence sets the expectation from the beginning, and when you follow through, it gives credibility. So, for example, you might say, look, I'm happy for us to communicate once a week, the day before handover of the children. We can communicate in that time over the phone and discuss how the last few days have been with the children and the plans that are necessary for the next few days. If you break this agreement, if you text me and message me and try and ring me multiple times a day, we're not going to do that by conversation. We'll do that by email. That would be the consequence of breaking that boundary. The other thing that you want to make sure is that you don't give anything more. It can be really difficult, but boundaries setting is just step one. Once you do that, you must be steadfast in your conviction. Resist the urge to continue giving in the relationship, especially if your boundaries aren't being respected. When you're constantly giving and getting nothing in return, it's the perfect storm that can actually end up with you being vulnerable and wildly unhappy. You deserve as much as you give to the relationship. If you're not getting what you need, then stop giving. You should always make sure that the narcissistic parent only takes advantage of that, only takes advantage of what you are willing to give. Being in a narcissistic relationship with a co-parent and doing that business of parenting is about setting boundaries, and it's about setting boundaries to make sure that you're emotionally and physically healthy to do so and continue to parent and be a happy person yourself. It's difficult and it's challenging. I'm not disputing that at all, but you can do it, and you need to do that by setting those firm boundaries. Look, enjoy the reading. I think it's a really good one. And like I said, take some time, make a cup of tea and sit down and watch the video, because it is a really good inspirational video moving forward. Have a great day. Bye.